And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught, and they're going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. These are, when I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. This is StreamYard, Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. This ongoing joke that I just can't seem to get the StreamYard settings, and maybe it's just not me, but thank you for joining me today. For those in the podcast, they seem probably hearing that every show these days. Weird thing, just I can't seem to get a handle on it when the screen's after the opening. Laugh at Ryan today. But I have a short show today only because I have a limited amount of time. I told you I was going to be doing, trying to keep regular work going throughout this process. But those that don't know, the Third Eye Carnival starts on the 4th, tomorrow. Steve and Teese are going to be coming to basically connect with me here at the studio for us to kind of play music. And I guess Teese is going to be filming for his upcoming documentary. The point is I have a limited time, so I'm going to get right into it, maybe less than an hour. As soon as I hear from them, ultimately, I'm going to jump off. So I wanted to cover a couple of things. This is really mostly a follow-up to the ongoing point that I'm finding difficult to not see as literally the most important thing happening to Americans right now. And I'm not trying to make this a partisan thing. It's not because it's my opinion. If we understand the foundational importance of our constitutional rights as it pertains to living in this state of society that we call the United States and how important that has been, just the First Amendment, but even just the Constitution in general. It's insane to watch how quickly this is happening and how we're watching Americans either because they don't understand, because they're misinformed, or because they genuinely don't care if it applies to something they don't like. And we're watching these things just diminish in front of us. Now, to be clear, they're not something that can be taken away by the government. They are inherent, God-given, inalienable rights that they existed, whether or not they wrote them down on that piece of paper, hemp Constitution piece of paper. The point is that they pretend that's the case today. They can turn it off when they decide. National security, for example. If you understand what inherent, God-given, and inalienable means, then national security or anything else would not change that reality. So I wanted to follow up on some points that I think are monumental. And it's going to be reiterating one that I'm going to keep making until it seems that most people are aware of how obvious this is. But a couple overlapping points, and one of the most concerning is this rapidly evolving awareness of how obviously Israel is influencing, infiltrating, if not completely controlling U.S. policy. And this should not be a contentious point. It shouldn't be about racism. It shouldn't be about anything other than governments manipulating policy, which we all know they do. So I want to play a few things that I think are very important in that regard. But quickly, before we get into it, just in case you're interested, thirdeyecarnival.com, the event from 4th to the 6th is going to be fun. And I guess appears to be some rain, but tomorrow, which will be the birthday party overlap, appears to be completely sunny, beautiful day. The other days may be a little bit rainy, but we're going to have fun either way. So I hope to see you guys there. I'll be there with the RV doing interviews inside and out, and just a lot of great things happening there. But just to jump right in, guys, because we definitely have, now that was just me, we definitely have some limited time today, which is hard for me, and you know that. So main point to start generally that I'm going to reiterate, and this is important I even think half our audience may not really grasp how important this is. Trump deportations revealed to be full of innocent people, legal immigrants with no criminal record. Now, this game has been played where they're trying to act like the media and understand the media, all sides of it, are always trying to lie to you and can manipulate you. So too are politicians. Vance, for example, lying continually about this one they claim is a leader of MS-13 that we can literally prove is not, even the evidence they're pointing to shows that they're wrong about that. That's how crazy this all is right now. But the manipulation is they're acting like the media or these dumb Democrats are just lying and saying, because they are in many cases, that they're not criminals. They're innocent people, even though, to be fair, when they're illegally here, you can't say that. But within that conversation, as we've already proven, they should obviously, based on our constitutional rights, the Supreme Court ruling, the roundly upheld reality that even illegal immigrants have rights to due process, constitutional rights. That is the fact, regardless of the screaming partisans out there. Easily proven. So that even within that conversation, they still were not given due process. The point, though, hopefully everyone can wrap their minds around this. There are also people who were they were legally in this country. For example, Khalil is an obvious example of somebody they just make up arguments about that we can prove weren't true. And that's not even the case we're making today. That was the first one. He's legally in this country with a green card, broke no rules, no laws, and ultimately had no criminal record and was simply removed. But after that, they went into the overlap with Venezuela. And yes, some of them, I guess we're told, because I still get to see anybody proven, anyone to actually be, and like I said, I wouldn't dispute that there's probably gang members in there, but I have yet to see it proven that anybody of them were, which is kind of wild when you think about it, even though likely some of them are. The point is we can prove many of them were not. And then many of them who were still legally in this country, not illegal aliens who just also didn't break the law in other ways, legally in this country, some with green cards, some with asylum, some in the process of going through asylum. It's a whole bunch of them. And they were arrested and some deported to El Salvador, others still in custody. It's absolutely wild. And I get back and forth with people online right now, some probably bots, acting like that's just not true. And you can prove it in court documents. You can prove it in every possible way right now. And yet you still get Trump and Vance and the rest just lying to you. Elon Musk just lying to you. And I think we can prove they know that they're lying. And why wouldn't they? They're committed to this, guys. And this is a huge deal. Even Joe Rogan seems to be pulling away and going, that's insane. That's crazy. That's horrifying. He just said that about El Salvador. But that's important to keep that in your mind. Innocent people in every possible way, legally in the country, no criminal record. And even to their point of their own records, that they weren't even charged with a crime. They simply went to a Palestinian protest, which they just now call terrorism. That's their own information, guys. So before we get into all that, I just want to point a couple interesting things out. I just thought that we're going to come back to this, obviously, as we will, as you, I'm sure, know, that's been one of my focuses for a while, just artificial intelligence and technocracy. We will cover this in a larger point, but just so you don't miss it. An AI model they're claiming has officially passed the Turing test, which essentially means that you can't tell whether it's, it's the test to decide whether or not how the best way to frame it. I'm not the expert on this, but the point is that to see if the computer decides that it's a machine, right? That it can tell that it's not a human. The test is basically to see if it is equal or beyond like human capacity, and the machine can't tell the difference, as I understand it. The point is simply about arguably reaching some kind of general artificial intelligence, like a sentient kind of like this is now beyond just an algorithm computer program. So we've been worried about this. Whitney's talked about it a lot. How do we know? Why wouldn't they just pretend that and then just dump their information in our faces and say that's what the AI says? So we'll come back to that. It's going to be important, I promise you. Also, I just thought this was worth laughing at and showing how ridiculous, cartoonish, and broken our system is. Cory Booker literally, and I don't even know how I can make sense of this, I don't even know I believe this, but I'm sure it was documented, apparently sets a record in the Senate with a 25-hour speech. I mean, how is that even possible? Did he not have to go to the bathroom? Yes, it seems insane to me. How can you possibly? I can speak for, I've had 6+ hour shows and I am beat after that. I'm tired. This guy for 25 hours. How can you possibly even say something of substance for 25 hours? That's just ridiculous. Obviously, it's a filibuster. It's meant to stop something. It's dumb, guys. Our system is ridiculous. And these people know that entirely. But the main point to start overlapping the main show today is about the point I started with and the overlap to Israel, which is pretty much going to focus for a few shows now. I think, and like I said, whether Israel's involved or not, which I think it's transparently clear that it is, this is important to Americans because your government is making drastically moves that should shock everybody. Even if you agree with that we should be changing rights to, if that's even though it's not possible, to, remove that, make limited speech instead, right? That kind of a move, which you could still point out how dramatic these moves are, not even going through the proper channels to achieve them. I mean, to me, that's why it seems clear this is about something else. But A lot of conservatives and Republicans are calling this out. This is just a turn. Pam Bondi saying justice is coming. And they're talking about effing Teslas, guys. Now, yes, as I said, arson combined with vandalism, the most extreme versions, cocktail bombs and burning some cars, which I'm not trying to diminish, that they should go to jail for that. And that could literally be 20 years. That's not bombastic at all. But most of the rest, like 99% of the others, are scratching cars or some other vandalism. And they are including that they're saying they're all getting 20 years. Now, maybe that's not what's going to happen. My point is, this is even jarring Republicans. As Ian Smith says, if you damage Teslas, we'll find you and arrest you. But if you F kids and you're a politician, we'll redact everything and break campaign promises to protect you. See, people have lines, guys. People have integrity. And this is crossing it in a lot of ways, and they're just trying to keep screaming over the top. They use their cat turds and insurrection Barbies to just pretend like everything's on track. People are pushing back. Here's Brooke Jackson, by the way, and not to include her in the, I don't even know if she identifies as left or right these days. I find her to be very insightful and very intelligent and, regardless of her political stance, I'm just saying because I actually don't know, she's willing to have all these conversations, and I find her to be an important voice in a lot of these conversations. The point is, she's speaking up from the corner of a medical freedom side. And here's MAGA voice saying, holy SHIT, Pam Bondi said there will be no plea negotiations. They should all receive 20 years minimum for vandalizing Teslas. That's not a joke. That's what they're saying. Meanwhile, letting everything else go by the wayside. And she says, vandalize a car and the system pounces, but flood the public with a misbranded, adulterated, quote, vaccine that has injured and killed who knows how many kids. That's not a scandal. It's policy. And the important part, ladies and gentlemen, Biden's and Trump's. That's, people, this is regardless of, we will all have different issues we feel are more important or side more left or right or whatever. But if you have integrity, it always shows through. Now, on that note, just since I pointed to her, I love Brooke Jackson. I want to make sure you see the great interviews we did. Again, don't forget, TLAV, demonstrating our value. The first group to do a video interview with Brooke Jackson about that huge story was The Last American Vagabond, myself personally. Brooke Jackson interview, this was December 2nd, 2021. Pfizer whistleblower exposes cover-up, calling vaccine data into question. Now, British Medical Journal was the first to put out the written investigation. But Brooke and I went back for a month and a half, going back about how, because this was her first important interview. I just think that I was honored to do that. I just think it's interesting how that's kind of stuff that we can put out, and yet we're still regarded by most circles as, how the game goes. We're not allowed to be something more, but not like we care about that. I think we're changing people's lives by doing this the right way, and I will always err on that side. Brooke Jackson, February 11th, 2022. Pfizer reveals concerns with data integrity, vindicating previous claims. And these are airtight, guys. From the first interview to the second, incredible. Even to the third, even more so. She has all the receipts. They're straight up lying, but look, that's where we are today too. Trump, everybody else still supporting this, guys. Trump and Biden, by the way. This was the last one on July 29th, 2023. Pfizer trial reveals big pharma, includes FDA, CDC, seen as too big to fail. Now, Justin Amash, in regard to the kind of left-right paradigm lie or the idea of the woke left and woke right, which let's make a point about this, guys. It's not a game. This is not accusing them of that, back and forth like it's a petty thing. It is about, it's about specific fundamental things, right? If you are using identity politics, if you are calling for censorship based on hate speech, right? It's all very simple. You're leaning into the same kind of ideas. When you're seeing cat turds scream about people going to prison because they scratch a Tesla, that's the woke right. If you see them asking to censor somebody because they're screaming about Israel, about whatever, really, anything. In this case, it's about free Palestine. Kick him out of the country. That's the woke right. Same thing the woke left was doing when they were screaming about you saying pronouns or anything else. It's in principle the same, just like the title in regard to deporting people from this country who have constitutional rights, green card, visa holder, American citizen. In principle, it is the same thing, guys. The legal reality is the same. Justin Amash says, if you recognize that politics is full of liars but consistently fall for lies from your own, quote, team, then you are the mark. The intended target of the long con being staged by those in power. God, if we could only just all understand that. Now, this is interesting. As you well know, I've got a lot of negative things to say about, now I'm just blanking on his name all of a sudden. That's crazy. Give me in the chat what his name is. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He's, prominent for the most part in his conversation. I just think I'm very suspicious about a lot of the ways he presents information. That's not the point, though. As always, and we demonstrate this regularly, it's not about the person, guys. Obviously, it matters who says something. You know, you consider maybe they have intentions to, but the truth is the truth, regardless of who puts it forward. Always consider whether they may be using the truth, right? That's what a lot of dishonest people do. Doesn't change the truth is the truth. What happens is people push back on the content because of who's presenting it. It should be the other way around, right? Fuentes, thank you. Nick Fuentes for the podcast. So here's what he says. I just think it's important to hear. This is exactly what I think is going on. And I think it's important to hear this from a person that's really tapped into the partisan field, but seems to be able to see the larger picture in regard to how it's being played. Now, maybe he's, again, using that for his own benefit for something else. You can decide. The content is the point here.
Tracking everybody that criticizes Israel, everybody that interacts with somebody that's criticizing Israel, and whether you're on a visa or not, whether you're a citizen or not, whether you're brown or not, Christian or Muslim, they're putting you in the Palantir database. They're putting you on the enemies list. You don't see a problem with that? A Muslim is being deported for criticizing Israel, and people go, that's fine. I'm going to support that enthusiastically because I'm not a Muslim on a visa. Okay, so do you not see where this is going to go? Surely, certainly, law enforcement and surveillance tools that were created to spy on Muslims have never been used against right-wingers. That's never happened.
Right.
You're telling me that law enforcement and the intelligence agencies are going to bypass the Constitution and infringe on the civil liberties of Muslims in the name of terrorism, and you think they might eventually use that against right-wing extremists? That's preposterous. That has never happened before. Oh yeah, except that's exactly what happened after January 6th. That's exactly what happened during COVID. That's exactly what happened after Trump got elected the first time.
Right. It's very simple. And you could also add the trucker convoy, right? It's the same point I make every damn time. How is it possible? I mean, and I know a lot of them are just dishonest, who are there for their own benefit, and that's all sides of the paradigm. But there's a lot of honest conservatives that are being tricked by a lot of this stuff, just like a lot of honest liberals in the same conversation in COVID, for example. The point is that we already know how this works. You're applying the same broken, using the same justification to go after people for something, for an association, like a red hat, for example. Right? They're using this, and it will be turned against anybody who's against the power structure. I mean, it's just insane. People, but this, I guess, this is why I think a lot of these larger people are starting to call it out, because maybe they were uncomfortable calling it out, but I think they're just becoming very clear. It's becoming clear that this is not in your interest. For those that genuinely want best for this country, even if it goes against their partisan group, will eventually stand up, because that's what they truly care about. Right? Here is Khaleesi pointing out another clip from Jeffrey Sachs, just recognizing, guys, why but I think it's very proven, think this is happening. Israel is very clear. I mean, let's be clear again. They're telling you that's what this is about. It's because people are speaking out about Israel. You can't say bad. I mean, Stefanik literally said you can't say things bad about Israel. On top of that, they're calling everybody an anti-Semite that speaks about freeing Palestine. It's obvious. They're telling you that. So we can prove and say out loud, Israel is why this is happening. So understand that, and then recognize how much of this policy is connected through this very same broken logic.
Israel runs the U.S. government, runs the White House. They're run by Israel. They're serving Israel. They're doing this for Israel. And that means that the United States is in war in places it shouldn't be in. No, we should not be in war in Yemen, for heaven's sake. We shouldn't be in war in Syria.
And don't forget, Israel just spoke up all salty about the fact that the signal chat thing, which I still think was completely contrived personally, that their intelligence that they gave the United States to go after Yemen, by the way, which resulted in them bombing a building full of innocent people, right? But you could argue they just did that to the U.S. and they're just too stupid to know, or they were okay with it. Who knows? The point is, it was very clearly now shown. That was Israel's objective, guys. Literally are fighting Israel's wars. And we know this if we're not blinded by partisanship or I guess care about Zionism more than your own country.
In Libya, in Lebanon, we're in war in all of these places. We have a group, Amateur Hour, in the White House deciding where to bomb, but they're doing it for Israel's behest.
Amateur Hour,
for
indeed.
American interest or American security. Not only is it Amateur Hour, not only is it Israel Hour nonstop, but it's as if we have essentially one-person rule.
Now, amateur hour, I agree with, because I think a lot of these people are picked because they're not bright enough to even realize they're being used. And that's not a knock on left or right, guys. The same damn thing happened. I mean, look at Biden, for crying out loud. That's why I think these people are in place. Right now, though, I think you got a lot of people this is the way I see most of this happening. I think more than ever today, we have people that are either willfully ignorant about the fact that they're being used, and choose to either they don't want to acknowledge it or whatever, but they're not really conscious of it. They're kind of avoiding even looking at that area that might show it that, or people that just simply do not know. They don't even recognize because they're more opportunists. They're just jumping at whatever makes them money. The point is, I don't think a lot of people even know that they're being used. It's this horrifying social media ecosystem that's just kind of a blob right now. And so I think a lot in the politics too. I mean, you look at the rest of these people from a KJP to a Leave It or whatever, and I just think a lot of these people are either so tied into their own political line that they just don't care, or they just don't even know. That's my personal opinion, but a lot of them are amateur hour, I think. People chosen for that reason. But here's the Hodge twins saying the new gaslight is, and this is hilarious to me where we are, you're woke leftist if you don't support Israel. I mean, think about how insane this is now. And it says, what is woke and leftist about wanting to put America first? Like, the point is, the term, it's like anti-Semitism. They throw it at anything that they don't want you to look at, or that they want to stop, anything about Israel, even though half the time it contradicts itself. Right? This is the larger point about Israel saying that everything we do represents all the Jews. And then you do something, and if you were to say, hypothetically, well, the Jews just did that, they'd call you racist. It's like, well, isn't that what you just keep telling us, that this is what the point is? That's why I recognize that Zionism is the plot in there. They're either way you go in that false narrative, you fall into a trap. It's pretty well crafted if you look at it, even though they're clumsy with their propaganda. But so now you're literally calling people in this country woke left, or like the right is attacking their own and calling them a woke left because they won't first support Israel while screaming America first. And this is a clip that we already showed you, that where Israel and Friedman bragging about how they can control U.S. speech. Pretty common today. But this is where you get the woke left, woke right. It's not about left and right, guys. That's the whole point of the woke left, woke right dynamic. I know there's a lot of people, as I'll show you in a second, trying to use it in order to muddy the waters. That's how this works. As we've talked about in the past, the terms regime change, for example, or any number of other things. That used to be a fake news thing until they just said, oh, well, it's real, but now it's because it's a good thing. Regime change for democracy. You said that back in the 70s. People would, that's insane, because it's not. It was something that was surreptitious. Regime change was a secret thing that nope. But now they say, make it different. So when I say it and you say it, we're thinking about different things, even though we're saying the same term. It muddies the waters. In this case, it's all about let's even remove the woke from it. That's just so we can attach the idea to it. It's about people who are censoring Americans for speech. Because you can't have anti this or anti that, anti-Israel, anti-trans. It's the same point. You're allowed to be anti or anything you want, or for anything you want. You can say and think whatever you want. You can't act in a way that would be a criminal act. So here, Meghan McCain, yesterday, says you can tell who the woke right and the woke left are because they're both anti-Semitic. Well, look at how lazy that is. Like, doesn't that just show you the whole thing? How in the world you could say, well, that they're now both woke because they are racist? But isn't the whole point of the woke thing that they're super against all of that? It just doesn't make any sense. It's all because this is for Israel. They're trying to it's just like Netanyahu standing up and saying that now we're fighting the deep state, and it's only just to try to glom on to the same narrative because they're failing in the public mind, whether or not the power structures don't care what you think and keep going. I just think that's crazy to me. And I said, this is insane. Everything means nothing. Nothing means everything. Welcome to 2025. Now, Michael Tracy, pointing to Josh Hawley, one of these kind of just cartoonishly childish and like one-sided people in Congress, says the president of Yale was by earlier today and couldn't name a single concrete policy Yale's implemented to keep Jewish students safe on campus. You mean aside from literally all the things they have that keep everybody safe on campus? Like, so what you're demanding is specific things that keep specifically Jews safer than everybody else? Why does that make sense? They have policies right now against violence, that's the point. So when they make that case, he frames it like this and goes, they can't name a single thing because they are clearly doing this for an agenda. It's wild. And so Michael Tracy says it will never stop being fun. Oh, and don't forget, by the way, the claim of all these people being attacked has been disproven 1,000 ways over, even from the corporate media in many ways. The 400% anti-Semitism thing they cited, that's from ADL, making everything Palestinian anti-Semitic. That's really what it is. They were caught. Michael Tracy says it will never stop being funny how Republicans and their media adjuncts made a living for a decade viciously mocking snowflakes and safetyism on their college campuses, right? Ben Shapiro famously saying, facts don't care about your feelings. We can't do this. Now he's literally doing that. only to adopt that exact same emotional manipulation framework to crush criticism of U.S. foreign policy in Israel. These are the bro flakes, as Steve coined. And just on another side note, speaking of bro flakes, and this is not in any support of this person or even the concept of the Tesla attacks, but it's crazy to know that this person was kicked off Twitter, which I can't believe I didn't see, simply because he put out a post that said, kill Tesla, save the country. Now, if you read the post, which it's right here, he's not in any way he's talking about take down the company because they think the company is seeding his plans for fascism. Now, whatever you think about that, there's a logical point to make about the money flowing through this and all the overlap of his conflicts of interest and how that money's being used to bribe people to go after judges, for example, which we will talk about at some point. So you can't come out and say, now go after this company, even if you used the word kill. If I came out and said kill Google, would they censor me on Twitter? So this is a personal attack against one person because they're lumping it into they're going after Tesla, even though basically right now I don't see any real evidence that shows they have any proof of who is some coordinated thing, even though it wouldn't surprise me if it was happening. Just think about that. So again, showing you his childish, petty personal acts, but yet still the free speech warrior. Does anybody still believe that? It's honest? Now, but here's Alex Jones is talking about, because don't forget, when real things are happening, he pivots into very specific things, just like Elon Musk. The Democrat deep states plan to launch a terrorist-backed civil war this summer, exposed by former DIA expert. Oh, you mean like the 17 times you told us that was going to happen before this election that didn't happen? And you swore up and down it was coming and you could prove it and here's documents? Well, guess what? Now, maybe it was going to happen and they shifted, certainly possible. My point is, this is kind of ridiculous that every time we get to a point where real things start to happen, they lurch into something about pedophiles or Muslims or Europe, or all of which have some importance to talk about. I'd love to see something that actually has any evidence to talk about a civil war backed, the game, guys. The reality is they're all on the same side. Your government is using people like him, if probably a part of it, or this game of left and right to keep you distracted as they literally build the prison around you. The Democrats, deep state, like, again, how dumb it is to argue that one part of the government is deep state. You can't recognize how if it was a deep state, they would go after the power structure, not some of it. It's so stupid, but people fall for it. Now, Randy Fine, by the way, to show you the Zionist overlap, we already talked about this in the last show. This guy is a monster. And I went over, 7 C's included a bunch more, but I think like 2 or 3 very clear examples of him calling for the death of children, calling to bomb more people's eyes because they happen to have a pager. This guy is a rabid Zionist and straight up anti-American if you look at what he's actually doing. And here's what's this hilarious point. AIPAC, apparently this monster just won in Florida. Which, again, my opinion, I don't think that your votes truly translate, guys, at least at the presidential level. And I think it's important to recognize that that's what we're dealing with in a larger scale, especially since AIPAC can straight up bribe people to vote for everybody. And they go, congratulations to AIPAC endorsed Randy Fine. Surprise, surprise. We're proud to support you. And he goes, proud to have been AIPAC fastest ever endorsement. Surprise, surprise. And for the haters who said they bought me, I have news for you. They had me for free. And then get this. Fact check. Nope, they gave him $26,000. Now, I'm sure he probably just meant that they didn't need to pay him, but they did anyway, though, which is important to recognize. So they bribed this man. The point is they didn't need to because he's already a radical Zionist who wants to kill children. But what's interesting is here's AIPAC saying Bernie Sanders is forcing a vote as soon as tomorrow on 2 resolutions to, guess what, block arms Israel. Now, Sanders has already shown himself to be weak and meek in this conversation, or any of them when it comes to something I think substantial. Either way, regardless of who, obviously we should be trying to stop illegal arms funds, which are illegal in the international sense and domestically based on what they're doing, for going to a genocide. He's just trying. So he's doing something the whole world recognizes should stop. But AIPAC stands up and goes, tell your senators to oppose these efforts. So wait a minute. A lobbying group is past the election process, past anybody being voted in, lobbying direct legislation for Israel? Yeah, guys, and that should be a big deal, but it only is not when it comes to Israel. Because you realize lobbying groups are usually almost entirely about funding directions for, larger people being elected. This is about specific moment-to-moment legislation where they speak up and throw money around to affect the outcome of American legislation as an Israeli entity. It is not an American entity. You can prove it very simply by looking at their background. It's even on Wikipedia, but we just lie to ourselves like everything else, it seems. Now, here's Randy Fine, the candidate who won, says Assad Abu Khahil, and it says, there is no suffering adequate for these animals. May the streets of Gaza overflow with blood. That's what Randy Fine said. Dan Sheehan said more than 100,000 people in Florida voted for this man yesterday. Now, again, I'm not trying to diminish that that's probably could have been the case. I just don't know how we believe that that's how it works today. Either way, some people definitely support this man. And most importantly, Donald Trump, who openly endorsed him for like the 5th time. But here, when Candace called him out for this, as he shared this picture of a dead baby in Gaza, where he said, how do you sleep at night? They were asked. And he said, quite well, actually. Thanks for the pic of a dead child in Gaza. That's the person we're talking about. That's the person who Donald Trump supports. And she called him out as a monster. And he said, I'm on the opposite side of you. I'm doing something right. Thanks for the endorsement. Just doubling down, guys. These people, maybe they are completely, maybe they can get away with this. Maybe my point is they think that. They think that they're untouchable. Maybe they are. I'd like to believe opposite. Thomas Massey, on the nose of that point, talks about dual citizenship in this country, which I think it's interesting how Fox, the guy, keeps trying to pull it away from the obvious, but it's worth thinking about because this is something he's putting forward. I bet you it gets pushed back on by everybody. But this is what we're talking about. The Randy Fines of the world. I'll make the point about dual citizenship and what we can prove in a second, but here's this clip.
Over the weekend, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard revoked security clearances for several people who are no longer in office. She wrote on X, per President Trump's directive, I have revoked former President Joe Biden's security clearance and revoked clearances and access to classified information for Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Fiona Hill, and Alexander Vindman. But why do out-of-office people still have Adam Kinzinger in the future classified information?
The government because they
act. I don't have any problem up front with the audience and
influencing the government.
Okay, sorry. The first part was about something I didn't want to get into. It's important. It's about the classified information and who gets to keep it. But we're rushing for time, so I'll skip that. But it's important to talk about in the future.
Because they can have conversations with people who are still inside of the government. You know, elections should have consequences, so take away their security clearances.
Or Congressman Massey, I've been following you on this. I'm really interested in what you're proposing, a dual loyalty disclosure act. I don't have any problem up front with the audience and telling anyone listening, I don't like it when I see an elected official have more than the American flag in their, for example, bio on X. I don't want to see a Ukrainian flag. I don't want to see an Israeli flag. I want to see single loyalty to the United States of America. Tell me about the dual loyalty disclosure act.
Yeah, we swear an oath to the Constitution. And the question is, if you're a citizen of two countries, which oath are you taking more seriously? Or can you take them both seriously? Look, I would prefer that people with dual citizen have to renounce their citizenship in the other country before they run. I would also prefer that if they are dual citizens, that they don't vote on issues that may affect those other countries. But at a minimum, we should do what the bill I introduced does, which is require candidates for federal office to disclose whether they have dual citizenship and which countries they may have citizenship in. That way the voters can decide whether they should be able to represent the United States while being a citizen of another country.
How broad is this? How broad is this problem, Congressman? How many members of Congress have dual citizenship?
Notice that he laughed right there. And I think this is very relevant, and I'll show you why. Because listen to this point, and we'll talk about it.
Well, you know, I keep hearing people say, oh, you can't prove that any of them do. Well, I can show you former people who were in Congress who did, and we only know because they ran for president and it came out. For instance, Ted Cruz had citizenship in Canada, and Michelle Bachmann, I think, had citizenship in Switzerland. Now, they both renounced their citizenship. There's no problem there. But the question is, what about congressmen who aren't put under the spotlight? What citizenship do they hold in other countries? And I'm not picking on any particular country. I just think this is a common sense bill. No. American citizens want to know. And I'm not banning it. I'm just saying, tell us which countries you're a citizen of.
I totally agree. I don't think it's focusing on any one country. I mean, it could be the Ukrainian flag pins that we see everywhere, or any other country. I mean, our loyalty should be singular, especially as an elected representative to the United States of America. Great to hear from you.
I mean, you know, it's funny. He doesn't need to say that again. And it's almost like, you know, it's conspicuous that he's like, it could be any flag. Well, obviously, man, the only reason you're saying that is because you all know what we're thinking about. What's interesting, though, is that there's 2 points. Like, I do argue that it should be something that, you know, I agree with both of them. And it's weird that the bill, it's a step in the right direction where he says the bill is just about finding out, which is interesting. I think that's the right way to do it, in fact, because it'd be more conspicuous for him to push back on something like that. Why would you not want people to know, right? That's interesting. But I do argue that it should be what even they're both saying, that I don't think you should be able to be in that position if you have a potential of conflicts of interest in regard to politics, being part of, like, have an interest in another country's outcome. Or as he said, swearing an oath to another country. Like, these things matter. And it's not just about Israel. It's really not. But it is the most important part of it because of how obvious that overlap is in this country. Now, the point about the dual citizenship is he's right, though. Right now, there's literally no requirement for them to even divulge that. How is that possible? Well, these very same people are the ones screaming about how you can't vote if you're not a citizen. I mean, it's in a weird way the same conversation, right? But on top of that, it's important to recognize that there are a lot of overlaps. Now, also, the main point, it's not about being Jewish alone. That's an overlap, sure. But it's not just, you can't just show who everyone Jewish in the Congress and say that's the issue. It's not. Because I can prove some of them, well, at least I would argue that some of them don't have a citizenship in Israel. But we already, and typically, I'll just read it from the Grok answer, they have to move there essentially and be, or at least plan to, and that's how that happens. But I've seen Israel give citizenship to people in Congress, or people in power, let's say, and people in political standing. That has happened. So recognize that this is an opaque situation, and that's kind of the point. So asking Grok first, it simply says there's no definitive public evidence confirming, and I was just asking about Randy Fine, holds any citizenship. And it goes on to make the bigger point about in general, and which is that no, they don't really have to show that. And so, but the evidence seems to highly suggest, even Grok says that is the case. But then you ask Brave, and it says Randy Fine is an Israeli dual citizen. This is mentioned in a post from November. Now, remember, this could just be information pulled off online. So these things are just broad. Derek made a great point recently about this. We should not be blindly taking, we already know that from any content about anything, even a article well-sourced, we should check it ourselves. Obviously, that goes for the AI dynamic, but it's a broad kind of what it's grabbing. That's why I find it useful, but we got to be careful how this, I'm never going to be the one that's leaning into like we see some researchers today, and especially not everything. I'm using Grok for a counterbalance to make a point. Largely with Brave, I try to use it, but the point is that as you look into it, it becomes clear that there's a lot of overlap and a lot of opacity to whether or not. And so that's why this bill needs to be there. And you know why this is coming out, because there is evidence in the past that is a problem. Now, Greg Reese put this out in the same direction, and I think it's worth playing. Scrapping the First Amendment at the behest of a foreign power.
On the campaign trail, Donald Trump promised to deport those protesting Israeli war crimes.
Unlike liberal Kamala, I will support Israel's right to win its war on terror. You have to support that. Got to win, got to finish it off. And instead of pandering to the jihad sympathizers and America-hating radicals, we will deport them. We will deport them very quickly. We have no choice.
When it comes to Israel, who has given him over $230 million, Trump keeps his promises. For simply writing an op-ed article on the Israeli genocide of Gaza, Rumeysa Öztürk was kidnapped off the street by unidentified plainclothes federal police.
And you saw this already. We played this on the show, right? And this is one of the best examples. She was legally in this country. I believe she was a doctoral student, at the very least, at Ivy League. I think it was at Brown. I forget what school she was at, but a high-level school. And she was removed because she wrote an op-ed about Palestine, and it was, you can read it. I showed you on the show. It's solid. It's not hyperbolic. It's not about Hamas. It's specifically saying divest because they're committing genocide, and they can't stand that. So for all those screeching out there that the guy's making the point that they're putting their masks on, they didn't identify themselves, they did not present a warrant. We talk about this. These people are unaccountable, guys, and they know that.
Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces?
But legally in this country,
why are you hiding your faces?
No criminal record, simply have the wrong ideas. That's what's going on in 2025 in the United States.
No, this is the police. Yeah.
The U.S. cornerstone.
Yeah.
Arguably the cornerstone of American freedom, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is to protect the right of the people to peacefully express their views, no matter who they may offend. But Trump's Make America Great Again movement is clearly about Israel first, and Israel is getting their money's worth.
People are demonstrating with passion. These ignorant demonstrators. Who are they demonstrating for? For these murderers, these rapists, these mass killers?
You know, even though there was no rapes that they can prove. And in fact, all the evidence shows it didn't happen. But we'll just keep lying about it because it's an agenda.
This is a reflection of a deep rot that has pervaded the intellectual hub of free societies.
Well, that's certainly true, but he's not pointing at himself, obviously.
And this vilification of Israel, the Jewish people, and Western values.
Nope, it's only Israel, guys. Anybody, I mean, that's the majority of the world right now. They're calling out Israeli government action. They're the ones conflating it with Jewish people or trying their best to conflate it with all things in the West. And there's a lot of overlap there. But it's all about saying, well, you murdered all these people in Iraq, so why is it not okay? Like, you're making an argument for you, bud. Yeah, we all cared then too, and you're doing it now again. It doesn't make it okay because you're allies with the other group that committed genocide. That's, and look, you can debate whether you think Iraq or anything others deems to rise to the level of genocide. That's why it's important just to simply recognize, even though we obviously know what's happening in Gaza is genocide, by every metric possible, if you are uncomfortable with that, then acknowledge that there's endless amounts of war crimes. It ultimately comes to the same position, guys. These people will be in jail, but there's no denying that. With the medics they just killed, I mean, every day there's another massive war crime that if any other country in any other context did it even once, would be earth-shattering. It would be we talk about it for months because Israel wouldn't stop talking about it. Nobody cares about these because there's something going on here. It's very simple.
Has been propagated by a systemic alliance between the ultra-progressive left and radical Islam. It must be resolutely fought by civilized societies to safeguard their future.
Right. The radical Islam that you can prove that the U.S. and Israel have been funding for decades. The most radical elements of the very Islamic things that Loomer and the rest point to, the people that Loomer support are the ones funding those things, just like Hamas, by the way. That's why this is falling apart so readily and rapidly, is because people can prove these things right now. Like I can prove these people were literally innocent with no criminal record, that were here legally. People just don't care. They don't like it. They don't want it. They're looking for the news served to them just the way they like. I don't think that's the majority. But think about that. Only liberals and radical Islam, aside from the fact that they're the ones funding these groups, think about, again, the ridiculousness of saying that the people who are actively speaking out, more than anybody, by the way, about human rights violations and so on, whether or not you agree with everything else they believe in, it doesn't make any sense. It's like pretending that ISIS is working with white supremacists, or, they will throw anything they can at you in order to make you feel the way they want you to feel in a certain situation to achieve immediate ends. And half the time, 3 weeks later, they do something that contradicts what they just said. That's the mainstream alternative media every day. Don't miss that overlap.
This is why we must all commend President Trump's decisive actions against anti-Semitism. And we must pressure other governments to do the same.
MAGA is leading the way in censorship, but that's not good enough for the Zionists who control America.
Anti-Semitism is not just an age-old prejudice. It is a contemporary crisis manifesting on campuses across the nation. It is not enough for individuals or institutions to merely claim they are not anti-Semitic. As my father once taught me, it is not enough for people, especially public figures, to be neutral or not be anti-Semitic. One must be anti-Semitic. We must demand the same of our universities and government institutions. This hearing, in my opinion, is an attempt to be just that, anti-Semitic.
There is no voting your way out of this quagmire. Israel has control over the U.S. government.
Government can do in 2 months more than any organization can do in its lifetime. The government, the United States government or the government of France or the government of any other country, has the power to rein in anti-Semitism in a much more effective way. People say, well, the governments are not in the business of changing the way people think. That's true, but, to my thinking, most people who are, anti-Semites, most of these people running around, we're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds. So, How are we going to, there's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can.
Just dehumanization, right? So people over here going, please stop the genocide, free Palestine. And now we know that exists, right? Let's just say in your mind, you think that half of them all hate Jews. Fine. I don't agree. I think it's obviously not the case, but you know that there are some people that don't, who just want Palestine to be free, right? They're giving you a broad net around all of them and just going there. They don't have hearts. They don't have minds. They were rapists, Hamas supporting terrorists, jihadists. That's a Loomer side. That's what they're doing. That's ridiculous, and everyone should laugh at people like that, guys. We all used to remember that broad strokes in any context was always ignorant, because you're going, it's everything in politics today. That's why, again, I think so many people are starting to see through this. But that's the larger point: is ask yourself why they would be so clumsy with these agendas, knowing they would shake people free. Either there's something else at the end of that that's not an American interest, or there's an end game here. That's my opinion.
Deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
Greg Reese reporting.
Okay. So right now, looks like I've got about 20-something minutes left. So let me see if I can get through this here at the end. Then we're pretty much, we're on track for the most part. So I want to highlight this. This is Redacted put out. Now, we already talked about this. In fact, I brushed over it, but I had a whole setup of like a segment I had ready that I haven't even gotten to. I do that all the time, in fact. Like, research something for hours one day and I just never end up using it. But that was about the overlap of the cartel and Zionism in Israel. It's actually shockingly obvious. And every time I get into these things, it's like, my God, how did I not know Israel was literally funding and working throughout the genocide in Rwanda or Bosnia? It's insane how obvious this stuff is. The point is that you can prove that. And you can prove, as they say right here, Redacted did their own research on it. Bombshell, Mexican cartels have Israeli spyware. Now, you can find that in corporate media. But it says they're turning American phones into spy devices. From your text to your searches, they see it all, even using your camera to spy on you. Now, that's called the no-click something. Like, basically, you don't even have to click a link. That's how this Israeli spyware works. That's the NGO group. That's Pegasus. That's what that's what Trump just made allowed in this country. That's what they're immersing themselves with that in this country. These are all so incredible. I don't know why these things are huge stories, but the point is that think about that overlap with the same people we're talking. MS-13. We're going after, you mean the same groups that Israel's giving spyware to, that you're working with? Guys, this stuff is all there. That's not to say every person that's in a gang is part of it, but you need to see how these things are engineered, manufactured, and they rush them toward the border, and then they let too many in. They turn around and go, I can't allow that. They're infiltrating us, and we have to do the biometric wall, and we have to censor it. It all comes together. Whatever the narrative is that day, and they're all manufacturing these things. And some of these parts get out of control, but at the end of the day, it is clear. You can see that they are moving pieces around the board. Now, Aaron again. Now, by the way, I thought I had that first. I'm going to go over this quick because I want to get to some of these clips here. Now, there was a point about this, about being partisan. The point is that it's just funny to me how many people will push, like this guy I talked about before. Not really familiar with him until this story, but Aaron Rechlin Melnick, who is an immigration lawyer. And simply because of that, people act like he is not to be trusted. It's like any political stance, guys. You can watch CNN and Fox News and recognize they're both trying to lie to you and still consider the points being made and ask you what the agenda is. The point is that you can look at what he's presenting as a lawyer in this conversation. And he claims the group is nonpartisan, but that's rare today. The bottom line is you can prove what he's saying. And people are just disregarding it because, he's a Democrat. That is the dumbest thing in the conversation from either side. This is important to recognize because the court documents are provided, which you can read for yourself and prove for yourself that what Vance is saying is a lie. They know what they're doing. And same with, what's her name? Leave it. They're lying. They're outright lying. Well, I would argue she may be lying, or she's just relaying what she's being told that's a lie and doesn't even know. I don't know why we'd think they're ever in the conversation. They're just press secretaries. But Aaron here says Vance is badly wrong. And Vance is the one claiming that this guy's a gang member. I think it was Garcia. I'll show you the name in a second. Oh, it's right here. Yeah. Kilmar Garcia. And the point is that this guy got picked up in a Home Depot in 2019. They picked him up on I think it was wearing a Bulls hat and something else that was not connected to anything. It was all, even the Bulls connection is because of the number 23, but it's a Jordan thing. That's the tattoo they claim. But now a Bulls hat somehow means Jordan, which means 23. Therefore, he's Venezuelan gangs. It is ridiculous. And you can prove that the actual document they're pointing to says that he was released with no charge. They even says that there was nothing to it. They wrote down MS-13 on that. That's what they're pointing to. How you even turn that into being a leader of the gang is the craziest part. But it's all here for you to look through, including the link to the document and everything they're highlighting for you. The point. And this was, I think I just had this in the wrong spot. This is a court filing this evening. The Trump administration said that we already know this, mistakenly deported a Maryland father to El Salvador. Now, this is just one that they've admitted to. I think it's right here even. Yeah, no ability to bring him back, they're saying. We already talked about this in the last show. Trump lawyers forced to admit they permanently sent an innocent man to a nightmare prison. Now, these are examples. This one in particular, he was here legally. He was going through a process. And the judge even then ruled you can't send him there. The reason he was given asylum from El Salvador is because he was being threatened by the very government or groups in the country, and they gave him asylum. Or in the process of. So there's a legal reality to that, and they kicked him out anyway. And on top of that, he's not a criminal. He had no criminal record. Same thing in every conversation. But there's plenty more that aren't even some process. People that literally had a green card who are here legally. Nothing changed, except they spoke out about Israel and they got kicked out of the country. And what's interesting is even Joe Rogan has spoken up about this, calling it horrific. I mean, there are people breaking rank with this, guys, and they're starting to go, this is crazy, because they're not absolutely lost in partisanship or whatever you think it is, because this is serious. What's happening is alarming and serious. Now, here's what Vance just said. Now, let's be clear. I'm going over it quick because I have a little bit limited time, but the last show we just did, it's all in here, guys. Trump deportation revealed to be full of innocent people. There's all the source material, all of it you can link to, all chronologic, so you can find it in the process of the time of the show. And there's countless court documents, even corporate media covering of the Trump administration saying themselves, these people were not criminals. They were here legally. They were deported. Here's what Vance says about the MS-13 guy. They claim is MS-13, even though we know Israel's working with them and, on and that. The point is that clearly we can prove that the only thing they're pointing to is the one document that they wrote that down. They weren't even charged at the time. And all this time later, it comes back around that he's the leader of this gang. So why wasn't he removed before that? And by the way, this went through Donald Trump's administration, guys. That's when that happened, 2019.
Few cases out there where the Democrats and the media say, oh, this person was just an innocent father of three, and then you find out, for example, I think this is the case that you're talking about. Back in 2019, an immigration judge looked at all the evidence, looked at all the data, and concluded that this allegedly innocent person that we sent to El Salvador was actually a member of an MS-13 gang.
False. Now, what's crazy is that just because Vance sits there and says it, that somehow that means it's true. That's the kind of hero worship we have in the partisanship. And of course, you get no pushback from Fox News that apparently did no vetting of the conversation or did and didn't push back even though they knew he was lying. Typical journalism in the corporate media today.
He had also committed some traffic violations. He had not shown up for some court dates. This is not exactly Father of the Year here.
My God. Now, in regard to the court violations, I was looking into that, and these are things that are, from the side of the information that I can see, it's not even relevant to the documentation being presented about the case. So if that wouldn't matter, if it wasn't presented in the case against him, then why is he bringing it up now? He's just trying to muddy the waters and make it about somebody who, God forbid, had some traffic violations, while you're literally ignoring people that actually committed violence or Epstein trafficking or everything else we're talking about, or continuing genocide.
The person that we don't think should be in our country. Here's the most important point, though, Lawrence.
Oh, but again, even if you want to think it's all true, they still get effing due process. That's what's so frustrating about this, is either way you go with it, they're not giving people their rights or acknowledging their inherent rights.
Says whatever the argument is, whatever the justification is, no one doubts. Not even the crazy left-wing media criticized the idea that we could deport this person. They just took issue with the reasoning.
Okay, but see, here's how the false binary works, right? Seeing how they're all on the same side and they're all working towards the same agenda, whether they know it or not, you can't go what the other side says, because that's not a full picture, because they're both pulling punches and making it work, So you need to look at the full picture of people like us. There's a lot of people out there. Glenn Greenwald, for example, has been railing against this because he knows what he's talking about. One of the things I've seen him more consistent on than anything is about constitutional rights, as that's his forte. And for crying out loud, it's out there. But you look at the left-right dynamic, and they keep you trapped right in the middle.
For why we deported this person. This was unquestionably an illegal alien. This was unquestionably a person who broke the laws to get into our country. This is
now you could argue that now here's the interesting overlap. Breaking the law to get into the country makes people think of climbing over a fence. I would argue it's actually inaccurate to say he broke the law to get in the country if you're coming to the gate and presenting yourself and trying to seek asylum. Is it illegal? Just because you're it's some limbo while you go through the legal process, that's not illegally. That's dishonest. But on top of that, that's not true. You could dispute the first part. Well, let's claim he was here legally for a moment until he was given asylum. The point is, that's not the reality of when they took action. But this guy is just lying, guys. That's the reality every time we talk about this. If you can't wrap your mind around politicians lying so they stay out of jail or so they achieve an agenda, then why are we here?
Is unquestionably a person an immigration judge had found had zero right to be in the United States of America. We do not.
Oh, and did they present information? Did we get to go through a process?
Ask permission from far left Democrats before we deport illegal immigrants. We do the American people's business. And again,
it's insulting to your intelligence, guys. That's what it is. Now, Leavitt did the same thing the day before, saying, no, he was MS-13 gang leader. Oh, and tied to human trafficking. You know, the same human trafficking that was completely pulled away from while they pulled all of their agents over to go after anti-Semitism, which Melnick reported in front of Congress. Apparently, all the screaming left, right-wing, right team sport politics right, who can't stop pointing at everything about pedophiles and all these different things, because there is importance in that conversation, suddenly don't care about it when they pull all of their effort to move to go after things Israel doesn't like. Why doesn't that matter? Because that did happen. Child trafficking investigations, drug investigations, they pulled the majority to go after people protesting. It's all documented. It's very easy. We went over it in the last show. As Derek said, in regard to Benny Johnson, gleefully sharing this idiocy, you're a mouthpiece for the establishment. The Trump admin provided no evidence for these claims in the courtroom. Now, in regard to the illegalities, I want a couple points I want to highlight. Oh, and these are just, I should have had this, I didn't get to organize. I was rushing. This is an example. So basically I put this show out. Funny how suddenly the image doesn't show. In regard to Trump deporting people who were innocent. Not illegally here, no criminal record. And they go, fake news. I just said, and the woke right strikes again. Do you see a bro flake when you look in the mirror or just a Democrat? The point is, guys, remember how the Democrats were like fake news to everything? Same thing we're seeing. That's one of the metrics for me anyway. The point is, it's not fake news. It's easily proven. And people just don't care. Another one here. I said, sadly, many Americans are still falsely claiming everyone deported is a violent criminal. But even if not, they're all here illegally. That's verifiably false. This in the show I linked to, I go over 6 different deportations of people who were here legally with no record. He goes, newsflash, saying not everyone being deported are violent criminals doesn't mean they didn't break the law. They need to be deported. So it's like the point is he thinks what I'm saying explicitly is me falling for the trap that no, they came in illegally, but they didn't break any laws after that. The words I just wrote out make it very clear. I'm acknowledging that exact point. I think it's either a bot or somebody who just reflexively pushes back. And I think it's a lot of the conversation, but you can go through and look. Somebody, same guy saying, there has been a warning going out that anyone who is found that is in the country illegally will be deported. And they tend to be found. I just said again, apparently you didn't read the title. It's obvious that this is something that is company. You can prove it. The documents are there. These people are trying to gaslight others. And then as TJ Truth rightly points out, even if they're here illegally, which I don't support illegal immigration or migration, they still have the right to due process under the Constitution. Both these foundational points are being pushed back on by the people who claim to be the most supporting of the Constitution. Either completely lost or dishonest. No ability to bring him back. Are we kidding? As somebody else pointed out, maybe I forgot to grab it. There it is. He goes, Matt Lech says, pretty cool how we can film these places in 4K. This is El Salvador. Like it's a Marvel movie. But if we send someone there accidentally, there's no way to get them back. It's obviously, it's ridiculous. And not only that, it's an innocent person. I mean, my point in the title today, guys, realize in principle, there's no difference here. An American citizen has constitutional rights. A green card holder or even an illegal alien has constitutional rights in the context of this conversation. So for them to be removed, it's really no different in principle. Obviously, it would be more of a big deal for Americans, but it really shouldn't be. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's alarming that we have to fight this argument as it's literally happening. Here's an example. Oscar Arias Sanchez, a Nobel laureate and former Costa Rican president who's been a vocal critic of Donald Trump, says the U.S. just revoked his visa. No reason. Is this a terrorist? You know what I mean? It's a Nobel laureate, for crying out loud, a former president of a country who simply speaks about Trump, and they yank it because these people are not following any logic, any law. They're just reacting, probably for a foreign country. But either way, it's important to recognize this keeps happening. There's an issue with Maine right now regarding Social Security information. They're acting childishly in petty ways. And remember that he's already floated the idea of sending Americans to El Salvador for Tesla actions, whether or not it's a Molotov cocktail or scratching a car. That's outrageous.
And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught, and they're going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right
And
now.
you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Arrival guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. These are, when I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two of them.
You're a terrorist if you dare to go against Elon Musk. And Pam Bondi has been almost cartoonishly saying exactly that. We'll come after you if you dare, if you better stop. It's just very weird. And of course, this whole building of this whole coordinated thing, which wouldn't surprise me, they keep dripping this down. Here, this clip, if you want to listen to it, at 13 seconds. Elon Musk announced that they know who's behind the attacks. Oh, yeah. And so you click the link. Guess what happens? They don't tell you who. She just asks him, do you know? And he goes, oh, yeah, we know. Oh, breaking news. Elon says we know. And then they title it, Elon announces we know. But nobody tells you who it is. Is that just the dumbest thing in the world? I mean, maybe they do. But the point about this is to control the information. And it's not about accountability here. Now, this is New York Times. Rubio has ordered diplomats overseas to scrutinize the social media content of some applicants for students and other types of visas in an effort to bar those suspected of criticizing U.S. and Israel. That's directly from the article. And it goes, I like how Israel gets equal billing with America here. The point is that you're going overseas now to look at social media. Now, you can argue, sure, we can deny people for a number of reasons in regard to coming into the country. Once they're in, they have due process. The point, nonetheless, is that this is not what we pretend this country is. Now you're dictating, you can't say those things, so you're not allowed in this country. Now, you can agree with that. You can even say it's in the legal reality is okay, but that's not what we pretend we are, guys. These people are breaking the image of what this country at least pretended to be. Glenn Greenwald says the pro-Israel censorship regime isn't just targeting foreign students, it's also constricting free speech rights of Americans. The Trump administration demanded Colombia implement a radically extended EU-style hate speech code that outlaws a wide range of Israel criticisms. But yeah, keep fighting for the free speech world, guys, as our country undermines exactly that with your voices. Wake up. And here's what the White House put out. I mean, how do you even wrap your mind around this? Making fun, even though, especially now that we know that they sent innocent people, no criminal record, who are here legally to El Salvador. I know at least 3 or 4 cases we covered in the last show who are in El Salvador. One is a kid who was in the process of getting his visa or asylum, so it's still illegal for them to remove him, who had no criminal record, who simply had the tattoo that they claim was a Venezuelan gang tattoo. They've now proven definitively that it was not. And here's what they do. They put a cartoon of a woman crying being deported. And that's it. White House posts that. These are children. And this official White House account posts a meme mocking migrant women being apprehended by ICE. Why would you even do that? At this stage, it doesn't matter what the context or backstory is. Posting this content is shocking. That's what she says. There's something wrong with these people. Now, look, you can agree they should be able to do what they want, post what they want. Fine. It's just about showing you that they're like, what is the logic here? This is Elon Musk and the Trump mindset of like memes and trying to troll people. It's embarrassing. The world's laughing at this country when they do stuff like that. Ryan Grimm says, another student disappeared by ICE, this time at the University of Alabama. Oh, guess what? An Iranian PhD student. We talked about it. The point is, this is not what they pretend they were going after. These are politically targeted, Israel-focused people that they want removed. Not breaking the law, here illegally. But yeah, they'll keep screeching online how they're all illegal aliens because the Democrats lie. You're the dumbest person in the room for falling for things like that. If you're honest. If not, you're just dishonest and you lie knowing you're lying. Immigrant women describe hell on earth in ICE detention. Now I'm going to wrap this up. The point is, I'll go into this another show. It's actually shocking what these people are, what they're telling you, what their treatment was in these ICE. These aren't people that are criminals. Yeah, you could say they're here illegally. Now, this is a separate conversation than that we were just having. They're here illegally. They're breaking the law, guys. That's very obvious. My point is that they're still human beings, and there's no reason they should be jammed into this like 3 times the capacity, giving them not enough water to barely survive on. Like, it just shows you there's a hatred here. And I don't think it's shocking to see how that connects with the other conversation. Aaron Melnick also points out there's evidence ICE has submitted in the case of the gang worksheet filled out by local cops in 2019. So this would have been over there. I just didn't organize it well if I was rushing. He had a Bulls gear on. That's what I was just saying. Not the 23 number, but just a Bulls hat that they then connect to 23, which then they say means that Venezuelan town. That's what they claim. Not like somebody could just actually get a Michael Jordan 23 tattoo. They have the wrong skin color in that tattoo. That's enough. We already talked about it. But I guess just a Bulls hat is enough. A confidential informant said he was part of it. That's it. It's very clear, and you could read it for yourself. He's always including the links, guys. But here she is, screaming that he's a leader of the gang. They know they're lying. This is another example I'll go over in the future. It's a different point, but it's about somebody who's here illegally, but the way they go through this, I think, is shocking. In the UK, they're randomly going after a group of Quakers that simply had a group meeting to have a protest, and they went in and arrested them. It's like, it's not just the United States. Now, just to wrap up here, I got a few more minutes, just to show you what's going on in Israel. Again, it's like you want to make sure we're not missing this stuff. The very group that your government seems to be completely controlled by. Don't forget that. I cannot understand, Matt Kennard says, anyone whose life hasn't stopped over the past 18 months. What we are witnessing our governments do is beyond belief. We live in the darkest times. A new world is being born, an ugly and sick and monstrous one before our eyes. Act now. Here's an interesting point. Netanyahu comes out and says, in the future, the state of Israel has to control the entire area from the river to the sea. Now, you guys already know this point. It's not new, but for those that may not have seen the contradiction and the hypocrisy on Twitter, Elon Musk came out and said, actually, I might have been able to grab it real quick. There it is. I think I got it. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, well. There's another one I put out where I called out Elon Musk. Because in the Likud party charter, which is Netanyahu's party, it literally, one of the first lines says river to the sea. So I said, well, and Musk said, you can't say that on this platform. That's genocide support. In regard to them saying Israel should go away, right? Well, okay, logically consistent, then it applies either way, right? Obviously not. So he is saying it. And I said, well, Elon Musk, I thought this was genocide language and would not be accepted on this platform that you said very clearly. Or does Israel get special allowance on this platform? And if so, why? Well, clearly he won't respond. Now this is Ghassan Abu Sita, a very highly regarded doctor from Britain who was in Gaza speaking out about this stuff. He says Israel tortures a child in prison to death. AP can't even say that. And they kind of, finagle with the title. And so a teenager in the West Bank who was held in prison dies. The story is obvious. The first Palestinian minor has died in an Israeli detention center. You think that's going to get called out by all these sycophants? Hardly. Oh, I'm going to come back to this too. Here's Batar worldwide. Batar is the one that got Khalil targeted, and they keep throwing names of this administration they keep responding to, jumping and clapping like barking seals. We've identified names of diaspora Jews, and we will recommend being banned from Israel, like Finkelstein. Yet again, showing you it's about Zionism and not Judaism. If you simply do the wrong thing that's against the Zionist agenda, even if a Jewish person, you are expelled, excommunicado from Israel or from the Zionist control structure, and Batar is screaming about that. Here's another one. Same thing. Now they're saying we want to occupy and cleanse Gaza. Surprise, surprise. We already told you that was coming. You already knew that. As lastly, they're now speaking up and saying that we are going to take all of the West Bank. We're going to annex all of it, which we already told you was going to happen. Now they're just officially making it policy because that is what the deal was with Trump, but they were already doing this, whether it's Miriam Adelson or the deal in regard to the false ceasefire. Both times he agreed to let them do that. Here we are. Don't expect him to say anything about it, even though it's verifiably a crime. Now, Iran, to end in general, let's not miss the fact Trump is about to bomb Iran, says Daily Mail. Top Israeli sources reveal planned attack on nuclear sites and deliver chilling war is coming warning. And we just gave you the clip last night from Propaganda & Co. This is very real, guys. And Michael Tracy says it's pretty crazy that the prospect of imminent war with Iran is being openly and explicitly telegraphed, and the political media class seems to be going, just kind of shrugging their shoulders. That is the coordination of the two-party illusion. And even in Yemen, guys, as Sarah pointed out on my birthday, in fact, The U.S. just dropped bombs on a vital water source in Yemen. Over 50,000 civilians are cut off from water. This isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate war crime against civilian infrastructure, crime against humanity, broad daylight. And I said, well, if you've been paying attention, this is nothing new. Just like the last decade under left and right administrations, two-party illusion, because Trump and Biden, and even before, have been doing the same. Remember, we've been talking about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Hodeidah port. They went after it intentionally to deprive them of food and anything else they need. 90+% of what they need comes through there. And the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been decimating this place for decades. Now they just did it again. There's nothing new there, guys. And you have to understand this is two-party illusion. They are the same thing. So I'm going to leave it there for time, guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Ultimately, we will be getting, I'm going to be, like I said, you might see little smaller things coming out here and there with the carnival. I may be recording and putting them out based on signal. But either way, thank you for tuning in, guys. Always, what you do out there after these shows is what I think is most important. Talk about it. Share the information. Spread the information. Make sure people are looking to the source material. Wake people up, guys, because this it's very clear. If you just get it in front of people, they may change their minds. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.